Hey there, boys and girls. Welcome to another episode of Luthorville. You know, when I was a little kid growing up in Cleveland, Ohio, there was this kind of tradition that a lot of people who had cool cars would detail their vehicles in the Cleveland metro parks. And now that I am thousands of miles away from Cleveland, Ohio, I thought I would still maintain that tradition and do some detailing on my Jeep and show you what that's all about here in the mountains of California. To be precise, this field right here in Big Creek Parkway is one of the places where I remember people always parking their cars during the summertime. You know, they'd have a Corvette or a cool Jeep, and they would just pull off the side of the road here and be playing music and wax their car right here in this field. So, in the time that I've owned this Jeep, I've actually come to really enjoy the process of detailing it, and I've done a lot of nerdy research and figured out a lot of ways to keep it clean, keep it polished, and that's what I want to share with you today. Here's a few images of my Jeep right before I washed it for this video. So you can see that it's got pretty dirty. There's quite a few spots on here. There's it had rained a few times up in the mountains, so this is mostly like rain drops and the dust from being in the mountains, getting kind of congealed there from the rain. So it's looking a little shabby right now. You can kind of see some rain spots there around the window, and then we come up here to the front rim. You can see a heck of a lot of just little muddy spots and rain spots on all this. And, of course, Jeeps get pretty darn dirty going off-road, so this is still really clean compared to a lot of off-road Jeeps. But like here you can see all this on the hood, again from the rains, how it kind of spotted. And, I'd like to clean all of this off so that I don't get really bad kind of etched in water stains on the Jeep. So right here you can see, as I run my finger through, look at how much dust is actually on there. See, so it's kind of hard to tell, but there actually is a heck of a lot of dust just from riding up these couple little mountain trails. And you can see some of these water spots here around the edge of the window. And right here, you can see how dusty it is on the interior, like the instrument cluster and right by the stereo. Quite a bit of dust just kind of collected there by the radio buttons and by the touch screen. And then right here, we're looking at the front windshield, and you can see that there's a lot of interior and exterior kind of spots on all that. So that's all the stuff we're going to clean up. So the very first thing that I usually do is I bring the Jeep to a car wash, and preferably one like this with a staircase on the side, so that makes it a little easier to get the roof of the Jeep. And you can see right here what a drastic difference it is in the hydrophobic kind of properties with the wax and stuff that I use. See, those front panels had been waxed and the rear roof had not. So you can see how much the water beads off the front and it doesn't off the back. So the stuff really makes a huge difference in terms of making sure that it has all the water running off of it. So typically, this is what I'll do. I'll just do a really quick kind of rinse because I do tend to keep my Jeep really clean. So just a quick rinse with soap and soapy water, and then I'll switch to just plain clean water to rinse it off. And that's it. That's all I do. And then I do the detailing after that. So sometimes I will even wait like a day or so before I go and do the detailing. And a lot of times people tell you that, you can't do that. Like, oh, you got to make sure you get all the water spots off and everything, like, right away. And from my experience, that is completely not true. You can wait. I've waited as long as 24 hours and still had no problem getting the water spots off the Jeep. Once I finish washing the Jeep, I will dry it off at the car wash with one of these fairly large kind of microfiber towels. And then, like I said, a lot of times I won't even do the detailing there. I'll wait till the next day. So my favorite products to use for the exterior detailing are these Griot's Garage. I love this ceramic 3-in-1 wax, or the ceramic Speed Shine. That one works really good too. These are two other ceramic coatings that are really good from the research that I've done. This Easy Graphene from IGL and the Graphene Ceramic from Adams. But these two are a lot more expensive than Griot's Garage, and they last about just as well, so that's why I haven't used them. And then sometimes I'll use the synthetic clay from Griot's Garage, and that stuff works really great as well. I tend to keep the Jeep so clean that I don't really need to use the clay that often. And then for the vinyl and rubber and all the plastic stuff like that on the exterior of the Jeep, I use 303 Protectant. But I've also heard this Car Guys Plastic Restorer is really good too, although I have not used that one yet. But I plan on trying that. So that's really what I focus on, is just the Griot's Garage and the 303 Protectant, mainly because I'm lazy and I don't want to use 10 different products. So, and also, they're not endorsing this video or anything like that. This is what I like to buy and what I like to use. And then I also use these microfiber rags, these little towels from Simple Houseware. Those are really good, and I find that they just have a nice consistency for buffing the Jeep and for putting all of the ceramic wax on the Jeep as well. Finally, I also like to always wear these nitrile gloves from Showa because they're made in the United States, and I wear them not so much because I'm worried about getting the chemicals of the detailing stuff on my hands, but because I don't get fingerprints on the Jeep this way. So, this way, as I'm detailing it, I can touch the thing anywhere that I want, and I don't have to worry that I just put fingerprint smudges all over the stuff that I just cleaned. For those of you who have never done any kind of video production or filmmaking, you might not know that these are actually some of the absolute worst conditions to shoot in, right, in a forest, because you have extreme bright sections with direct sunlight and you have extreme dark with the shadows. So it's really difficult to get the camera to kind of balance all that out. But as I'm sure many of you know, when you wax a vehicle, you're supposed to do it in the shade. So we're going to move the Jeep into a little more shade before we get started. And before we get started showing you my approach and my technique, let me prove to you that yes, these water spots can indeed come off. So the water spots that you saw on there, those had only been on there for, like I said, maybe 24 hours. And I just wiped some of the ceramic 3-in-1 wax over the top, and now you can see it's got a slight haze to it. And so here I buff it off, and it looks really good. It looks really nice. It looks really clean. Now, those water spots that are around the edge of the window, those have been there for a long time, and those are ones that I unfortunately did leave sitting way too long. So if you leave them sit, yes, it will get baked into the glass and to the paint. Here are some water stains that are on the paint, and again, these were only there for about 24 hours, and again, they can come off really easily. Hit it with a little bit of the ceramic spray, kind of wipe it on there, and then I take the dry microfiber cloth and come back and buff it, and you can see that the water spots are completely gone. There's no sign of them whatsoever. So you can wait, I'd say, a day or two, but I wouldn't leave it sit longer than that, or they will get etched in permanently. Here's another example of the more permanent kind of water stains that I got on the glass. But, once you pull away, you don't notice it as much. But, again, I kind of wanted to show this because of the fact that I'm not a professional detailer. I'm a complete amateur, and I screwed up, and I made some mistakes. And like right here in the paint, you can see some of the really dark little spots of those water stains. Like, there's really no way to get those out short of like a professional buffing or something. But if you pull away from it, you don't really notice them quite as much. So all in all, that's really the biggest thing that I screwed up. But if you look here, like on the hood, you can see it's pretty darn clean, pretty darn shiny. And there's a few little splotches in there that you can see, but I don't really have any problems in the clear coat like spider webs or any kind of swirl marks. It's all pretty clean, other than a couple of those little water stains that I kind of messed up on. Typically, I like to do my windows first, just because they, they're kind of the most sensitive to getting scratched or something, so I like to do those first. One thing about the products that I use is that they actually are not recommended for glass, but it also doesn't say to not use them on glass. So I've been using it on the glass for, pretty much since I bought the Jeep, almost 2 years. And, it haven't had any problems with it. Here you can see the Speed Shine is for paint, trim, and wheels. And the 3-in-1 wax is for paint, wheels, chrome, plastic trim, and paint protection film. But it doesn't say that you can't use it on glass, and it doesn't say that you should, so I use it on glass and it's fine. According to the instructions, with this ceramic wax, you're actually supposed to buff it off while it's still wet. That's something that I never do. I don't even see how that's possible, because you would have to work so fast to, get it on there and then buff it off again before it dries. I don't do that, but it still looks really good even though I buff it off after it dries. Here I'm going back and buffing off the ceramic 3-in-1 off the glass. And, I try to look at it at these weird angles and stuff to make sure that I don't miss a spot, and to make sure that I don't have any kind of weird haze left over, because it does kind of haze up a little bit. They call it flashing. If watching the professional detailing videos and things, it's called flashing when it dries. And as you can see here, you can tell where the haze is at, and it buffs off really nice. So you don't really have to buff it off while it's still wet. Like I said, I'm really confused by that in the instructions, just because it flashes so quickly, it dries so quickly that I don't see how that would even be possible. But it still looks really great the way that I've been doing it. After I finish the glass of all the windows and the mirrors, the next thing that I tend to focus on is all the lighting. So I'll do the tail lights, and then I'll do the headlights, and also do the grill while I'm getting the headlights. And again, the reason that I kind of do it in this order is because, as any kind of dirt and grime gets on the rags and the microfiber towels that I'm using, I want to make sure that I'm not scratching up any of the glass or anything, because, it's a lot easier to fix stuff like the clear coat than it is to fix stuff like scratched glass. So, granted, it doesn't ever mess it up, but like I said, it's just sort of my technique and my method and the way that I like to do the stuff. So this is me, buffing the stuff off off of the grill and off of the headlights after I've applied all of the ceramic. Once I complete the glass and all the lighting, then I move on to the paint and usually start on the hood. And as you can see here, again, I have some of the water stains over the serial number. But once I kind of apply the ceramic and buff it off, you'll see that all those little water spots disappear pretty well because they haven't been on there for all that long. So, you know, again, this whole process is just, for me, it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy doing this. I probably try to detail the Jeep maybe like, I'd say about once a month, something like that. And, you know, it gets fairly dusty in Southern California, and then with me riding on mountain roads and kind of fire roads and going up in the desert, you know, you do get quite a bit of dust on it. But right here, I'm buffing it off, and you can see how shiny it gets, and it really is still a pretty nice mirror finish on this paint. I'm really happy with the way that it still continues to look, and you know, it's all due to using all this ceramic polish. I don't really use wax. I've never really used, you know, kind of that old school wax on this. I think I might have used it once, and then I moved on to this. And that's one of the things that I learned about this whole process, is that, you know, the longevity of the stuff is really what matters. Even, you know, that old school wax that your grandfather used, it looks just as good as this ceramic stuff when you first put it on. The question is, how long does it look good? And for me, this is why this newer kind of detailing technology like ceramics and graphene and things like that are really good, because it tends to just last for a really long time. You know, you can have this stuff on here for months and it still looks pretty great. So, you know, and that old school wax might look good for a week, you know, and then it starts to wear off. So, you know, that's really what it's all about. And when I was doing all my research to figure out which products I wanted to use, that's what I was really looking at, was how long does this stuff look good? Does it still look good a week later, a month later, 3 months later? And I think for the longevity of the products and for the cost, I think the stuff that I'm using is some of the best stuff that I could really find. There are a couple things that, you know, last a little bit longer, but I don't really like them quite as much just because of the price. You know, that's like, it's 3 times the price, but it lasts almost the same amount of time. And, you know, to me, that just wasn't really worth it. Once I finish all the painted parts of the Jeep, I move on to the fiberglass of the roof and the roof panels that are up front. Now, this stuff, I don't really tend to buff it off. I just spray it on and kind of spread it around with the microfiber towel, because, you know, for one thing, I mean, you don't really see it, so it's not really that important to buff it off. But also because the fiberglass has this black matte finish, it honestly doesn't really look any different. I mean, if you buff it off, it still looks pretty much the same. So there's really no point in buffing it. So I just kind of wipe it on and just leave it as is.
I do the wheels next, and that's it. And these, I usually don't buff these either, because again, just because they're like this black kind of matte finish, I've noticed that when I buff them, it doesn't really look any different. So rather than spend the time to do all that, I just kind of wipe them down with the Griot's Garage and just leave it. Now that I've done all the stuff with Griot's Garage, I move on to my 303 Protectant. And this stuff is what I use on basically all the vinyl and plastic and stuff like that. Oh, and the rubber of the tires as well.
One of the things that I appreciate the most about the 303 Protectant is the fact that it has this really nice kind of matte finish to it, and it really makes a difference in making all of this vinyl and plastic really look a nice deep kind of black again. And the thing that I like about it is, you know, it seems like if you look around and try to find these kind of vinyl restorers and plastic cleaners, a lot of them on the market are glossy. It's actually really difficult to find ones that have a matte finish. And I just don't like the gloss. I think it just doesn't work with my Jeep. I like having all the black as much of a matte color as it can be. And that is, you know, what the original trim looks like. It's supposed to be matte. It's not supposed to be gloss. And that's one of the great things about the 303 Protectant, is that it's a really nice finish and it's a matte finish. The downside of this stuff is it only lasts for about a month before you really need to reapply it. And right here, you can really see the difference here. See how the bumper is starting to get a little oxidized? It's starting to get a little white. So you'll see how great it restores it. I mean, look at that. It's just totally black again. It totally matches up to the fender. So the stuff works really great. But like I said, the downside is that it only lasts about a month. So that's actually the reason that I'm also considering trying that other stuff I told you about, the Car Guys plastic restorer, because that is also a matte finish and supposedly it lasts a little bit longer. And this stuff is also stuff that you can use on the interior. So any of the sort of vinyl and the faux leather and things like that on the inside, like on the dashboard and the steering wheel and all that, you can also use 303 Protectant or the Car Guys plastic restorer on all that. And it's important to kind of read the instructions, because not all of this vinyl restoration stuff is meant to be used on interiors. So you want to make sure that you get the right stuff if you use it on the inside of your vehicle. 303 Protectant is another product that you're supposed to buff off, and I don't, because again, I don't see a difference. You know, whenever I put it on the fenders or anything like this, I mean, you can see, as you saw in the earlier footage, it looks great and it looks really nice, and it really brings back that kind of really vibrant matte black. It's a nice deep rich black, but if you buff it off, it just kind of looks the same. It doesn't look any different. So I'm like, all right, why bother? Why go through the extra step? Because it really looks identical whether you wipe it down and leave it or wipe it on and buff it off. So I just kind of put it on there and leave it that way.
And finally, you can use the 303 Protectant on the tires. And that is typically what I do last, because by the time you get to the end of doing all this, your rag is pretty dirty and you know, it doesn't show up obviously on the black of the tires. So that's always my last sort of step, is to just give a quick wipe down on the tires with the 303 Protectant. And that's it. That is detailing the entire outside of the Jeep. The final step is to clean the interior. And typically, because I do keep it pretty clean to begin with, I can just use a microfiber towel with just distilled water, and that tends to be enough to get all the dust off and to clean everything nicely. Although I do occasionally use the 303 Protectant on
the interior, like on the dash and things like that. So this right here is the windshield, and you can see just plain water again can really clean that up, and all the stuff you still see on there is stuff that's on the outside. And a mix of 50% water and 50% vinegar also works pretty well on glass. Well, that wraps it up, and here we have some final shots of the completely detailed Jeep in both sunlight and in shade, so you can really get an idea of how it looks once I finish detailing all this. And, you know, I mentioned in another video about my Jeep that serial number there on the side is actually my grandfather's dog tag number from World War II. And I have to say that he is a very big inspiration to me to keep this Jeep so clean, because this Jeep cost about as much as he paid for our first house, and I think about that all the time. Like, the fact that I spent so much money on this thing, the least I can do is keep it looking as brand new as possible. So, yeah, I often think of what he would say if he knew how much this thing cost me. And it's like, that's why I have to wax it so much. That's why I have to keep it looking good, because that's the least I can do with how much I spent on it. But you can see it turns out really nice. You know, again, it's not perfect. I'm an amateur at this, as I said earlier. You know, so I did end up getting some water stains on it that I can't get off now. I tried everything. I tried the vinegar, and I tried what else? Lime away. I tried bleach. You name it. So I think it can really only be taken off by buffing or by using some pretty harsh stuff that I kind of don't want to risk doing, because I'm not that skilled with this sort of thing. But all in all, I think it looks really nice. You know, I constantly get compliments on how good it looks, and that's nice. So, you know, it makes me feel like I must be doing something right if people are still complimenting how nice it looks after having the thing for about 2 years. So again, here, a few close-ups in the shade, a few close-ups in the sun, and it really gives you an idea of how everything looks and all the products that I used. And I hope you find this beneficial if you're interested in detailing your own vehicle. So in honor of all those cool guys in the Cleveland Metro Parks detailing their cars in the 70s, let's close out with some appropriate music.
Summer breeze makes me feel fine, blowing through the jasmine in my mind. Summer breeze makes me feel fine, blowing through the jasmine in my mind. See the paper laying on the sidewalk, a little music from the house next door. So I walk on up to the doorstep.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Luthorville, how I detail my Jeep Wrangler. And remember, folks, if your ambitions don't scare you, they're not big enough. But if your ambitions are to detail a Jeep out in the middle of the wilderness where there's bears and mountain lions and rabid raccoons and coyotes, then well, those ambitions probably will scare you, so you should probably carry a knife.